Sure Meet and Learn session, this time about circular construction. And my name is Bob Borgrave. I work at the city region of Parkstad Limburg, which has joined the Sure network earlier this year. We're very happy to be part of this international network, and yeah, we also look forward to co-hosting this session. I think some people don't know what Parkstad Limburg is. It's a city region consisting of 7 municipalities in the former mining area in South Limburg, around the city of Heerlen. We have around 250,000 people living in the region, and as a former mining region, we've been transforming from a mining region into a park city. And well, it has a lot of challenges, of course, but now we're looking the way we've taken the way up, I might say, and yeah, we're looking forward to, within the network of Sure, to contribute and to learn from other city regions, metropolitan areas, to how they are coping with their challenges. I think a lot of challenges are not very local, but are global challenges. And as a city region, as Parkstad, we, for us as cross-border cooperation, of course, very important. The city region of Aachen is very close to us. We've also enhanced the cooperation with the city region of Aachen. For example, on last Wednesday, with a very nice workshop on a policy level with civil servants and politicians from the city of Aachen and Parkstad combined. And I think as a cross-border region, cooperation is vital, and I think that also counts for a European level. Today, Simon Duindam will tell us more about block materials as a part of circular construction. He's been working at the city region of Parkstad for quite so long time. I'm not sure, Simon, how long your presentation will take.
That depends on how many questions there are. But I will take a presentation, of course. It will take about 20 minutes, I think.
Okay.
20, maybe 25, depending on how quickly the videos are going. But I was planning to do it in 20 minutes and then have 40 minutes for questions and discussions.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to have my presentation first, because the things I'm telling may be very new for a lot of people. But of course, ask your questions from your own perspective, because that's the real challenge to meet today. How can economics and circularity meet each other?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Simon. And I would like to hand over the floor to you. So you said during the presentation, no questions, because
it's best to have it this way. Normally, I would say everyone can talk and everything, but you have to get a complete picture of my presentation first, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And Dagmar said in the chat, this meeting is being recorded. If people don't like to be recorded during the session, then they can switch off their camera, of course. So as Simon said, questions are after the presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A, which would take about 30-40 minutes. Okay, Simon, then without further ado, I would suggest to give the floor to you, maybe a short introduction of yourself and then the presentation. Thank you.
Well, my name is Simon Duindam. I studied economics at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. I'm originally from the coastline in the Netherlands, which has a flat place in the dunes. It's called Noordwijk. That's my original place. In 1991, I moved to Heerlen to join the Open University. I got my PhD in law and economics from Maastricht University, where I'm living, and I'm meeting you from Maastricht. A few weeks ago, it was still Melbourne, but now I'm in Maastricht. So we are in the same time zone. My companies, because we are I've got a few private companies. They're all based in Heerlen, which is part of our Heerlen-Aachen city with 800,000 people, because it's not just two places, it's one big city with a Dutch part called Parkstad and a German part called Aachen. And it's our main metropolitan area, which is in the triangle between Amsterdam, Lille and Cologne, because I thought it was outside because it was too south for the triangle, but someone said Lille is a little bit more south than Parkstad, so I was glad to hear that in the preparations. I said I'm an economist, and in earlier times I always wrote papers about how to approach a certain phenomenon. Do I have to approach it from the background in which we thought, or should I look at it from a social perspective? So my presentation is about economics and circularity, and where do those two meet each other, or what can we learn about if we take a look at circularity and economics. And I will include in my presentation all kinds of things we've been doing in my company Block Materials, also in the project Digital Deconstruction, and maybe give some examples from the Parkstad region in which we're busy with in all kinds of programs. So, can I move? Yeah. On economics and circularity in the building sector. This title already says something, that you could approach circular building as we're going to do something circular in the building sector, or we can look at what kind of characteristics circularity has and how can the building sector adapt itself to those principles of circularity. And these are two approaches. The main approach that's done in practice is we're going to do something in the building sector with circularity, but I'm going to say that's going to be a dead end. But unluckily for me, 97% is taking that approach. You can also take it the other way. What kind of things circularity involves, and how can we think about those things about circularity and look at the building sector to adapt the building sector to those principles of circularity. My next slide is, I'm an economist, and economists have thought a lot about circularity. This is a table économique from François Quesnay in 1758. This was the first description of a business cycle. In this case, of owners, laborers, agricultural class, things like that. So thinking about closing gaps and make on a macroeconomic level about circularity has been in our field. But I got difficulties discovering it in the building sector, because scarcity is defined differently in economics as in the building sector. They use two different definitions. Another person which was very important, I think, for circular thinking is the Nobel Prize winner called Douglas North. And he wrote a lot about how institutions in the Middle Ages evolved, and when was the Middle Ages getting out of the Dark Ages, and what was needed for that. And he discovered that if farmers were able to get their sowing process done for grains and things like that, and they were able also to harvest the grain, they would invest in all kinds of novel things concerning agriculture. Because in those days, it was not guaranteed if you invested in something, you would also get the fruits. And North discovered that once the absolute power of, for example, monarchs or other things, they were dissolved and organized differently, there was an incentive to do something for the future. And he formulated a theorem that's called the fundamental theorem of exchange. So what do I need to organize in order to get something done for the future? And in the circularity field we're in, we have to know how can we make contracts with the future. Because if I don't do anything now, I won't be able to get the fruits of the circular economy in the future. I won't be able to be directed to that future. So there won't be a circular economy at all. Well, he discovered the principles of institutions that should be organized in order to get things organized in a circle. And for us, it's a circle how to organize things. For example, how do we get a brick out of a building and it will be reused in 2100? That's the main challenge to do. Based on that perspective, there are many reasons which are described in the economics world why a future transaction won't hold. For example, I haven't got the information asymmetry. Maybe some goods have characteristics they're called public goods, or there may be externalities. Well, in this diagram, I've written down, I've collected 9 reasons for market failure, which for a circular economist will say there are maybe 9 reasons why we are not able to organize circularity in such a way that it can be adopted by the building sector. And are there certain elements which we can combat with that we can organize? And I've selected the 3 important ones, or maybe 2 very important ones, which we're working on also in a digital deconstruction project, how to deal with that. And I will show you first something about information asymmetry, and the second one is about property rights. So I have to start a video now. And so I got out of this screen into another screen. You see a car and you see a lemon. And what I'm going to tell you in this 1.5 minutes is something called the theory of lemons, which says if I don't have information about the quality of a car, I will always value the car at the lowest price possible. But if I have more information, for example, about a brick or a part of a building, then the chances that things will be reused are gonna be more expected. So I'm gonna stop this one. I'm gonna go to the other. No, it's not this one. Where is my, I prepared that. It's this one.
Buy a 5-year-old Model ABC car. We'll assume he's only interested in this exact model and age. In his city, there are 20 such cars for sale. The problem is this: they are not all alike. Some of the cars have several frequently hidden problems and can become a headache for the new owners, cars usually referred to as lemons. Other owners have been luckier or more careful when it comes to maintaining their vehicles, perhaps both, and as such, their cars are very good. Unfortunately for Bill, each seller knows how good or bad his car is because he's had it for enough time to figure this out. Bill, however, doesn't, and this is a case of information asymmetry, a type of imperfect information which leads to quote-unquote market failures, as some economists call them. We'll say a fair price for a lemon is $5,000 and the fair price for a very good car is $10,000. Bill doesn't want to pay $10,000 because he has to factor in the risk of the car turning out to be a lemon. So he will try to go as close to $5,000 as possible. Lemon sellers are happy enough with the state of affairs, whereas those who own very good cars are not, and will be tempted to leave the market and simply keep their vehicles. Such scenarios have been described in George Akerlof's famous The Market for Lemons 1970 paper, with him actually receiving a Nobel Prize for his information asymmetry-related research. However, do keep in mind that not everyone agrees with this perspective, and especially the proposed regulation to fix things, with, let's say, libertarians being against the market intervention in such cases, stating that entrepreneurs can step in and find solutions, for example, specialized marketplaces, auto buyer consultants, and so on.
So in this case, I would like to say that for the building industry, it's very important, especially concerning existing buildings, and that's 95% of the stock, we have to make an inventory of all the materials in a building. If we do that, we get all kind of information about the quality, size, and things about materials that are needed by other people further on in the value chain to use those bricks in a proper way. It also told us, also in projects we're doing, that if you have every information available, then the price of a second-hand material will approach the price of a primary material. And that will also mean that since 2018, the prices of primary materials have gone up by 50%, more or less. The space to include all kinds of activities to get the quality of materials right, or to register it, or things like that. They gave us a lot more space to do things like making an inventory, making analysis of the removability of materials, space for storing, space for refurbishment, or for big economic recycling. So information about quality of things which we haven't registered yet is a very important aspect of circularity in the building sector. And in the way material passports are made, in the way those databases are used for material passport, is a way of digital innovation we did in the digital deconstruction project. But in order to make a contract for the future, we also need another element involved, and I'm going to show you in the next video.
Ideas of Ronald Coase. Coase's most important contribution in economics is his work on the role played by transaction costs, legal rules, and property rights in allowing or impeding the negotiating and bargaining that individuals do with one another, particularly when trying to resolve conflicts. Recall from previous videos that transaction costs are those costs that people and businesses incur when they exchange goods and services. For example, the financial costs, as well as the time it takes to find someone with whom to exchange, to negotiate the exchange, and to enforce the agreement and resolve disputes afterwards. In his famous article, The Problem of Social Cost, Coase explained that in a world without these costs, people would be able to easily negotiate with each other when conflicts arose to arrive at solutions. But transaction costs do exist in the real world, and they do impede the bargaining that could be used to resolve conflicts. Coase's key insight is that the level of transaction costs is affected by legal rules, including property rights. Basically, good legal rules keep transaction costs low. Let's explore this complex but incredibly important idea with Coase's original example of a conflict between a doctor's office located next to a noisy candy maker, a case that ended up in court. The conflict arose because it was unclear if the candy maker owned the right to make noise, or if the doctor owned the right to be free of noise. The lack of clarity of property rights meant that neither party knew how to bargain with the other. When the court declared that the doctor had a right to be free of noise, bargaining became easy. If the candy maker valued the opportunity to continue operating noisily, he knew that he had to purchase that right from the doctor. If the candy maker didn't value that opportunity that highly, he knew that he had to cease operations in that building and move locations. Creating a clear property right within the legal system facilitated bargaining and prevented further disputes. The insight from Coase that transaction costs, property rights, and legal rules are critical to determine the degree to which people can effectively resolve conflicts and use resources efficiently, spawned an entirely new field in economics, and is one of the reasons he was awarded the Nobel Prize. For more information on Ronald Coase, visit essentialcoase.org.
And maybe you're all going to think, what does Ronald Coase has to do and the idea of property rights with a circular building and building circularity? Well, one of the things I already said, that if you want to organize circularity, I have to be able to make contracts to the future. And be able to make contracts to the future means you have to define property rights on an element of a building. Nowadays, we've been working on that for the last 3 years. If you want to register something, you go to a notary, you get a bill of a few €1,000 in order to have your property right organized. And it will be part, for example, of your estate, which will be delivered to future, children, other people in your family. What we did in the digital deconstruction project is when we made an inventory of a building and registered every material in a material database, we connected it to the blockchain. And in the blockchain, because of the characteristics of the blockchain, we will be able to see that information as unchangeable because it's registered in the blockchain. We can only change that to put an extra ledger in it. So we were able to follow that information in the future. We were also able to attach a property right at a much lower cost, as was earlier done by a notary, by using blockchain technology. And since we organize property rights, we also organize the liability aspects of future delivery of such a brick or part of a building to future users. So the element of Ronald Coase, he said, if you want to solve a problem, for example, waste of materials, and in the building sector, only 3% of materials are used in a high valued way, and 97% is used for landfilling or put on the roads or thrown away or burned, we have to organize property rights first. And property rights can only be achieved if the transaction costs are low in order to organize such a system. And we used blockchain technology to organize these things. Because blockchain technology organizes contracts and property rights, we can also connect it to other contracts. For example, how much CO2 emissions are involved. We can use it to combine with option contracts. So you will be able to buy already the bricks in the building, which is not demolished yet. If you want to organize circularity, you have to organize your property rights of the elements you want to be circular. If you don't organize your legal structure behind the things you want to be circular, you're not able to make future contracts. And to do it in a proper low-cost way, you have to look at technologies or legal enforcement mechanisms that are really useful to use without professional things like that. And we use the combination of a database with inventory of building materials combined with blockchain technology. And for example, we're working now also on enhanced marketplaces for architects to use that information in order to build new buildings. So there is a guarantee that registered materials from old buildings can also be used in new buildings. The blockchain technology has that characteristics because you can follow every material in a blockchain ledger. Well, these are one of the very interesting digital innovations which come forward from combining information to combat information asymmetry, to give future owners of the building the information they need about the quality of materials, and also give us the legal infrastructure to organize those future contracts. And then the question is, of course, what can you do with it? And then I'll go back to another video, because we did not start this way of thinking. This way of thinking was started by an architect originally from Aachen, but he's based in the Netherlands now. And I will show a short video of what he's been saying about circularity and what our challenge is going to be in the building sector. You probably all know him already, but this is a very important part.
Thomas Rauw, founder of Turn 2 and Rauw Architects, two of the first companies in the Netherlands dedicated to circular economy, created a new circular economy concept by reversing the business model of the consumer society in which products are supposed to have a limited lifespan.
Nieuw betekent altijd nog net niet stuk.
So one does not buy a lamp, but light. Not a fridge, but cooling.
Die energierekening is ook voor jullie. Ik zeg, ik heb toch geen stroom nodig? Jullie hebben toch stroom nodig?
If the consumer pays for light as a service, the manufacturer will make a very efficient lamp with a very long lifespan, because that's his new revenue model. Thomas Rau, together with Philips, developed this system of selling in 2010. Together with Bosch, he introduced a model for renting out washing machines on a performance basis in 2012.
En dan ontstaat het prachtige moment dat iedere product die service wordt, die wordt in principe een depot of magazijn van grondstoffen.
In 2015, Thomas Rau realized the first circular energy positive building as a raw materials depot for network provider Leander. Recently, Turn2 launched an initiative for the Universal Declaration of Material Rights as a contribution to codify circular economy principles on a global level.
So what's very important to understand is, and I don't know if you're familiar, lots of people now available here can read Dutch, but I will tell it. If you come from the economics way of thinking, and also which Thomas Rau explained, that scarcity is defined as a relation between ends and limited resources, which have alternative use. That alternative use and the way we as economists approach the way of alternatives is different from which is stated in the building sector. On the right hand side, it says in Dutch that scarcity is defined concerning the availability of materials. Well, that's a way scarcity is approached in the linear economy. But in a circular economy, you always have to look at in what way products, materials have alternative uses. So for example, if I reuse a material, I do not have to produce a new material again. So the cost of reusing materials are based on the primary price of the prices of primary materials, not based on what is a material worth as a secondary source itself. So you always have to combine in a circular economy, what's our next alternative that's gonna be needed if I throw something away or I do recycling. And then of course, the other challenge is what Ronald Coase says, if you want to use something different, you have to calculate all the costs involved in order to make a real alternative worth. And George Akerlof said, in order to combat the quality issues which are eminent in the circular building industry, we have to get information about all those materials. These are what Ronald Coase called transaction costs. We have to know information about removability. But if we do so, Akerlof also said, the value of secondary materials drastically increases. It's not just a lemon car of $5,000 anymore. It's going to be the price of the new car. And Akerlof wrote this article in the 1970s when cars were really lemons. And if you look at the car industry nowadays, you see that the reusing element of the car is at a high value rate of 99.7%. So in the car industry, we have a circularity of almost 100% of all elements of a car. In the building industry, we only have 3% of the elements that are reused in a high valued way. But in the car industry, every element of a car is registered, even in the blockchain concerning, for example, Toyota. So if you think about scarcity and the way to approach things, the car industry has made a development concerning circularity. So nowadays, you don't hear about lemon French cars that are rusty around the road, like we heard in the 1970s, those who were already there in the 1970s. But nowadays in the car industry, you hear about that 50,000 cars are recalled because there may be some problem with the airbag. So in the car industry, we introduced all kinds of liability issues. We organized the problem of information asymmetry, and we organized the ownership, also the liability, concerning parts of a car. Well, the challenge for the building industry is to set up a same system, to make an inventory of all buildings. So we map all the materials. So we can see every material as an urban mine. And Heerlen, for example, everywhere you come, it's about urban mining. And so we can make a comparison between the way in which primary materials are made. They're coming from a mine, going to a production facility, and then into the process, combining it with urban mining, which involves making inventories, register information, getting out a decent demolition or disassembly way of making those materials in new materials again. These are parts of, for example, our research or our applications in projects. How can we define those processes? Can we collect information about the transaction cost or cost-benefit analysis, which is done in the digital deconstruction project? And can we make a comparison between materials that are made in a way we've done for the last 100 years, or can we apply all kinds of secondary principles, complying and dealing with the problems that can be solved from a circularity perspective? The definition on the right-hand side is the official definition in Circular Building 23 about scarcity. So there's still some space to go in, with CB23, although CB23 has very nice reports and papers published already. So I think that gap will be bridged in a few years. But in the building sector itself, the right-hand way to deal with scarcity and availability of materials, that's still the mainstream. And the way to define economics and circularity, like information needed to enlarge the quality of things, is limited yet. And that's a challenge for our group also to go forward on. Then the last slide is to show you that if you want to have information or workshops on the methodology of circularity yourself, for example, how to write policy, how to write tenders, using digital tools and innovation or other things, you can contact my colleague and on errol@blockmaterials.com. So we can also put it in your problem perspective, how to deal with my elements of circularity. And that was my presentation.
Thank you, Simon, for the interesting presentation and videos. I think it was, for me at least, quite new information because I'm not really into depth in that field of work. Dagmar asked a question. Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit, Simon. It seems like a general question. What is blockchain? Maybe you can explain it a little bit for people who don't know it.
A bit. Of course, it's very confusing. People know hear a lot about bitcoins, things like that. But blockchain is a general technology that is used to organize all kinds of cryptology processes. It's used for example, make coins. But blockchain will say that information is stored in a block. That block can't be changed in terms of information. When information is put in that block, but information can be added by a new block. So you get a display of information, and in this case, in our case, about the ownership of a material in a building. And that is a chain of blocks with information. Because every block can be changed, it can be used in a legal sense as a property right, but all the blocks together in the chain, you can follow the ownership of that piece of material. And that's very useful because at every moment, I can detect who is the owner and who is liable for the future delivery of a brick for a new owner. So we're using that technology to organize legal processes, which are done by a notary now, in a much faster and much efficient way. That also concerns the energy consumption of the blockchain technology, like Peter is telling, because we hear a lot of stories about the energy consumption of Bitcoins, but that's the exception. The general thing is that blockchain technology can be organized in a public blockchain or a private blockchain. And then the energy consumption is not more or less than usual databases there is. So don't be confused by Bitcoins or things like that, because they cost a lot of energy. It's only one application of blockchain, which I think will not be have no real future, I think. But the application of blockchain in the real world, so not in the monetary world, is completely different. And in the digital deconstruction process, we've been making all kinds of blockchain technology applications, which cost no energy at all. It's just a way of thinking, of course.
Okay. Thank you. We have one question in the chat and one and a raised hand of Dagmar.
Can I ask before, because this is
Okay.
following this question?
Okay, yeah.
Who's the owner of the information?
The owner of the information is the owner of the brick. So once every owner has got a registration or hash code, he's the owner of the data.
Okay, and he can, and where is it stored?
It's stored in the blockchain. So it's stored in an open, in the cryptology of, for example, Ethereum, if it's a private blockchain. And the blockchain, of course, is the combination of information of all computers combined. That is that cryptology. So you can't say it's in a database or things like that. It's on the cryptology of the many computers involved that make up the blockchain infrastructure to do so.
Okay.
And that's why it can't be hacked. And it's always a secure way of storing information about ownership.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe I think the question of Peter Paul from The Hague maybe is related, because he asks, what is the energy consumption of this blockchain technology? Because it seems to be
I already
high.
said something about that's the way you use blockchain technology, because there are ways to use blockchain technology that don't cost any energy at all if you compare it to other ways of IT, but they're very energy. Well, there's a lot of energy consumption in Bitcoins, but that's the way the Bitcoin process is defined. There are many other ways to define the blockchain process, which cost a lot of cost less energy. So it's like how much energy you use by using an airplane going from Heerlen to Paris instead of using a bike or things like that. There are many ways to get there. But don't be confused. If you hear about blockchain, don't be confused by Bitcoins. That's that's one application. That's an exception.
Okay. I think the question of Emma de Wijs is a little bit related to Dagmar's question. Well, she asks, how do you cope with the ownership of the information in blockchain? How do you cope with that?
Well, the thing is, because information once in a block can't be changed, you always know who is the owner of that information. And in our case, we put in the ownership of the material bit in the blockchain. So the information is always the ownership of those people, which information is in the blockchain. That's one thing. And in our case, we use the blockchain to define the ownership of a part of the building. So Thomas Rau, for example, once you know that the light bulbs in the Schiphol airport are the ownership of Philips or Signify nowadays, we know that Signify can deal with that part of the building that would be in older days be part of the Schiphol building. And so and it also leads to, for example, you don't buy materials anymore, you can lease those materials. Or a building has not one building owner, but has maybe 20 parties that will deliver parts of the building. They will stay the ownership because afterwards they will get the materials out of the building again. And that's also an incentive to build in such a way that materials can get in and out of the building quite easily. Otherwise, they have a lot of damage with their own ownership of materials. So using this approach will lead to other ways of construction and will lead to that it's going to be more assembly and disassembly instead of construction and deconstruction.
Okay.
But you need your information household in order to organize it. You can't do that without all the digital tools which we've made also in the digital deconstruction project.
Yeah, that's a good bridge, because Dagmar also asked, you just mentioned the project of digital deconstruction. I think maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that project. How did you use the technology within the project? Within the project of digital deconstruction?
Yes. The question in the chat box is to Paul, but shall I answer the question, Paul, or are you going to answer that?
Well, it is
I think
good.
you know
You read
more
this
about it than I do, so it's good for you to explain it.
Yeah, well, in the digital deconstruction project, on the one side, we got the development of digital tools concerning digital 3D scanning, removability analysis, using digital material databases and blockchain technology. And the last two bits, they're part of the task of block materials. On the other side, we got 10 pilot projects from Luxembourg, France, the Netherlands and Belgium, which are applying those tools. And of course, it's a lot of trial and error. Also, when you have to develop these tools, we have to understand each other. And so the project digital deconstruction is what kind of digital tools can be used? How can I apply those tools? And what kind of problems do I encounter applying those tools? Or what kind of ideas do I get concerning digital deconstruction or digital building when I use these tools? Well, 9 of the 10 pilots are about deconstruction, but in Heerlen on the Woon Boulevard, we also got one project that is constructing with all a construction project with all kinds of material that can be assembled and disassembled. And it's a showcase also in which way digital tools can be used and in which way buildings can be built if you use those tools and the ideas behind the tools. The project is called GTB Lab, and it's called the Green Transformable Building. It can be found on one of the biggest Woon Boulevards in Europe, which is, of course, the Heerlen-Aachen Woon Boulevard in Heerlen. And it's a showcase also for other parties to have a look how you can use all these kinds of things. Interesting question from Emma, I see.
Yeah. Would you like to answer that question as well?
Well, if you take the 9 market failures mentioned, there are 3 big ones. Well, the biggest one is information asymmetry, the lemons problem. If I don't have information about the quality, I can't get any further at all. That's the first one. A second one that was in the left-hand corner, that was about incomplete property rights. If I don't know who has the problem, I can't make any contracts to the future. That's one. The second thing is the second market failure is the property rights problem. And we talked about it a lot concerning Ronald Coase and the blockchain technology. The third one, the third biggest one, is the public good character of an information infrastructure surrounding buildings. The thing is that if you're going to collect data like we do in a digital deconstruction process, that data can be used by anyone. And that doesn't give us an incentive to invest in those data. So there's a, that's called a non-rivalry problem. That's a characteristic of a public good. And that will say that if we want to use these kind of techniques and methodology on a large scale, nobody will really invest in this problem. Because my investment is going to be your fruit. So the European Union already said we have to organize a big building database concerning all kinds of information. And in order to do so, we also need a national program on material or building passports. Well, there are a lot of initiatives. Every municipality, of course, and every proposal for an Interact project or a European one can include a part of this problem. So you should put into your proposals, we need building passports for our, because we have to fill in the gaps of the information infrastructure that is needed. On the other side, of course, a lot of projects can be organized, also the Growth Fund or the European programs to set up on a European scale. So the three big market failures are information asymmetry, lack of property rights, and the third is public good characteristics in the circular economy. These are the big three ones. And I like the question very much because in order to organize circularity, you have to think about all these kind of problems and how to deal with that. Otherwise, you're going to set up projects in circular building or deconstruction, and these projects are going to fail. And it shows in reality. In the digital deconstruction process, we only did, well, the first exercises. And there were a lot of problems in pilot, things like that. That's part of the learning process. But if there are not markets, for example, to exchange secondary materials, you're not going to set up a circular building industry. You're not going to set up a circularity concerning deconstruction materials, things like that. So there are many things to organize as an infrastructure that you can go forward.
Thank you. Dagmar, I'll raise her hand again.
Yeah, but maybe someone else wants to say something first. Other question?
Kirsten Chon has, she asks, regarding the types of technologies used, was having a digital twin on the building ever considered?
Well,
Simon.
It's the same as making a digital twin is a material passport. So putting information about a building in a digital material database is the same as making a digital twin of a building. It's another word for the same thing. Yes, of course, you want to have for every building, you want to have a digital twin. Yes. Concerning materials, energy, and for example, also cables and other things that are in the ground. These are the three elements for every building you want to have.
Okay. Dagmar?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. It was very good to get this whole, also this thinking background to understand why the tools are used, because we, of course, have the tendency to use them because we think it's logic, it's good to use it. I was wondering, you did not a couple of pilots. What is it, and you learned, so what do you think is the next step that has to be done?
One of the next step is to not put the focus on the building, but put the focus on the ideas and the behavior and of those parties who are going to ask for secondary materials. So, for example, to focus on why should an architect design a building with secondary materials, or why is he or she not doing that? But the same applies, why is a building company not using secondary materials or a recycling company? So get the demand side involved. Because on the digital deconstruction and other projects, we got the supply side involved, which is in Kirsten's terms, making digital twins, including removability analysis, things like that. Then we have to organize the supply, the demand side of things, and then of course how to combine those two elements, because there are many obstacles for architects to not use secondary materials. How to deal with that problem? How to deal, for example, that there may be materials available from a building. There are no new buildings to be built with those buildings. So how to deal with coordination issues in time or in size. We also have to deal with all kinds of legal constraints using materials which are coming from the linear economy, regulation bits, building decisions, things like that. There's still a lot of old stuff. We can combat those old things by improving the quality of secondary materials, for example. And then, of course, we have the question that in every building, we have to know which kind of materials really can be used because they're toxic, or there may be safety issues and things like that. And that can also be part of the inventory process by using more advanced equipment, infrared camera, things like that to see through walls. Or, well, these are what I'm just saying like now in the last minute. These are already subjects in European projects or descriptions of European projects, but only on a very small scale. So the big thing is, of course, to educate also all the results already given so that we can distribute all this knowledge to other parties, examples, so we can really set up a secondary infrastructure that secondary materials, so from the urban mining field, are used as the same way as from the primary mining part. And that's a big challenge, of course, in Heerlen too, because we're not only the old mining area, because of the transformation, we have a lot of buildings that can serve as an urban mine. And we like mining in Heerlen. Doesn't matter which mine there is, we like mining.
I think that's a good ending to this presentation. We first we mined coal, and now we're starting to mine within our urban areas. Thank you very much, Simon. If there are no further questions, then I think we can wrap this meet and learn session up within the time. So that's always very nice to do that. I want to thank, of course, Simon and Dagmar for hosting this session. I think it was very educative, at least for me, because for me, I learned.
Thank you, Bob. That was the purpose of this meeting.
I hope it was also educative for the other attendees. I think, yeah, that's it. Welcome everybody at this.
And see you in Heerlen on the 8th of June.
And see you on the 8th of June in Heerlen, of course. We will send you an invite.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Put it in the chat as well.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.